I'm not a folklore expert. I'm just the kid who grew up hearing this story every December by the light of a red candle while the wind clawed at the windows. English isn't my first language, and this isn't even my first version of the story. I've heard it in my mother's voice so many times that I'm basically translating her words as I type. If anything sounds off, blame me, not her. She's sitting across from me right now, in our cabin in the pines. Snow is stacked high against the door. The stove is burning low. The electricity is out again, like it usually is when the storms roll down from the ice peaks. So the only light is the tall red candle between us. In our village, red candles in December have a specific meaning. People in the cities think December is about Christmas lights, markets, family dinners, all that stuff. Up here, we don't talk about December as a festive season. We talk about it like an old bill that keeps showing up in the mail. My mother always starts the story the same way. In this village, she says, her voice low but steady, December is the scariest month of the year, and it's our own fault. Then she leans closer to the candle and begins, a long time ago, hundreds of winters, she always says. The village was even more closed off than it is now. No roads, no cell towers, no tourists, just a cluster of houses pressed between the dark forest and the white mountains, like we were hiding from the rest of the world. Everyone had a place. That's the first rule you have to understand. There was one butcher, one baker, one blacksmith, one man who knew how to set broken bones. People were born into roles and died in them. The village was like a spider web of duties and obligations. Pull one strand too hard, and everything shook. The sin of one is the sin of all, my mother says. That is what they believed. One person's mistake could starve the whole valley. So they watched each other very closely. If a young man drank too much, someone counted. If a girl stayed out too late with a boy, someone saw. If anyone talked too often about leaving, the whole village heard it within a day. They called it keeping the balance. It looked a lot like fear. Winter was the worst. The passes filled with snow, and the village was cut off. No one in, no one out, just wood, ice, and the slow burning of stored food. At least, that's how it was supposed to be. Then the outsider came. She arrived in the first real snow of one winter, in a closed, horse-drawn coach that creaked and groaned like it wasn't meant for mountain roads. The driver barely looked at the villagers when he unloaded her trunk and pushed it toward the edge of the square. She stepped down in a long coat that was too thin for the cold. My mother always describes her as not young, not old, with a face tired from travel and eyes that didn't match any of the local colors. She spoke strangely. Her accent twisted their words into new shapes. Some people thought she was from the lowlands. Others whispered that she was from across the sea. It didn't matter. She was not from here. She told them she needed a place to stay until the snow melted enough to cross the pass again. Just a few months, she said. She would work for her keep. The elders argued. They didn't like anything that didn't fit into their web. An extra person meant extra food, extra risk. But turning away a traveler in deep winter is the kind of thing that keeps you up at night. Superstition goes both ways. So they put her in an old wagon at the edge of town, near the tree line. Not a house, not quite a barn. Somewhere they could watch her, but not have to look at her every day. She tried to be useful. She brought a fiddle to the inn and offered to play. The men liked the music. The women didn't like their men liking it. Within a week, the innkeeper told her not to come back. She tried her hands at weaving. Her fingers were clumsy with the local looms. She didn't know their patterns or their prayers. The other women laughed behind her back, and the forewoman simply told her there wasn't enough yarn to waste on her learning. She tried to carry water and chop wood, but the cold cut through her city-thin clothes, and her hands bled and blistered. People shook their heads and said she wasn't made for this place. So she found another way. She had a deck of cards from wherever she came from. Strange symbols, strange suits. She spread them on the little table in her wagon and told fortunes. For a coin, she'd tell you if your daughter would marry well. For another, she'd mix herbs into old bottles and call them remedies for coughs and bad dreams. Some of her herbs were real. Some were just boiled weeds and colored water. People went anyway. Hope is cheaper than medicine. The men, especially, found excuses to visit her wagon at night. They told their wives they were checking the traps or helping with late deliveries. Then they went to the edge of the road where the wagon sat, a little hump in the snow, with a thin line of smoke curling from the chimney pipe. They learned to brush away their footprints with pine branches on the way back. The forest was full of branches. Their houses were full of lies. The women, of course, blamed her. They called her witch, temptress, parasite. It was easier than admitting their husbands were weak, easier than blaming the way the village suffocated everyone until any open door looked tempting. The butcher was different. He was younger than most of the men with status, but the village already leaned on him. He knew every animal by weight, by smell, by the sound of their feet on snow. He knew exactly how much meat each family would need to see the winter through, and how much salt was left in the barrels. He was quiet, not unfriendly, just distant. People trusted his hands, not his eyes. He went to the outsider's wagon in daylight. He brought her meat, wrapped in cloth, bones for boiling, fat for frying. When she tried to give him coins, he shook his head and told her the animals had more meat than the village needed that year. Later, he brought her firewood, not the damp scraps she could scavenge, but good, dry logs from the store that was supposed to last until spring. He said there was excess. There was no such thing as excess that high in the mountains. They talked. That was the real crime. He listened to her stories about places where the sea went on forever, and forests grew without snow. She listened to him talk about a village where every second of his life was scheduled before he was born. Little by little, their visits became regular. People noticed because people always notice. First, they whispered that she had bewitched him. Then they whispered that he was dangerous even before she came, that he had too many thoughts, that he didn't appreciate the balance of things. When he stopped spending every night at the inn, when he didn't always join the elder men's conversations, the whispers turned into anger. The butcher was not just a man, he was a position, a gear in the machine. If he left that place, if he broke his part of the web, everyone would feel it. So when word spread that he and the outsider were planning to leave together after the thaw, it wasn't just scandal, it was betrayal. They didn't wait for the thaw. On the coldest night of that winter, when the wind shrieked and the snow hit the houses like thrown sand, the village decided to fix the imbalance. They went to the wagon with torches. My mother says they prayed while they walked, which somehow makes it worse. They prayed for protection even as they planned to burn a woman alive. They smashed the small window of the wagon and threw in burning brands. The dry wood caught fast. The canvas roof went up in a rush, sending sparks twisting into the darkness. Someone shouted that this was mercy, that they were cutting out a rotten thread before it snapped and took them all down. The butcher heard the shouting. He ran from his house without a coat, boots half-laced, shirt open at the throat. When he saw the wagon burning, he didn't stop to think about balance, or web, or duty. He just shouted her name and ran through the circle of men. They tried to hold him back. He swung at them, wild and desperate. For a few seconds, it was chaos, shoves, curses. Snow trampled under heavy boots. Then someone hit him with the flat of an axe. He went down. More blows followed. Quick, panicked, one on top of the other, until the snow around him was no longer white. My mother always goes quiet there. The candle jumps a little in the draft. She watches the flame steady itself before she continues. The outsider did not die in the fire. She was not in the wagon when they burned it. By the time they realized that, the butcher was already dead at their feet. Someone saw a dark shape running up toward the tree line, a coat flapping open, bare hands pressed to a roundness under the fabric. Her belly, my mother says. She ran into the mountains with his child. No one followed her. Maybe they thought the cold would finish what they'd started. Maybe some small part of them already understood what they had done and didn't want to see it up close. Either way, she climbed alone, higher and higher, into the ice and wind. The wagon burned down to black ribs behind her. The village went home to warm houses and locked doors. Pee on the mountain. There were no warm houses, just snow and hunger, and the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat like a drum. My mother lowers her voice when she tells this part, as if someone might be listening through the walls. She should have died up there, she says. Any normal woman would have, but she wasn't just a woman anymore. On the highest ridge, where the rock is bare and the snow blows sideways, the outsider fell to her knees. She had nothing left, no food, no shelter, no husband, no village. So she did what desperate people have always done in places like ours. She offered herself to whatever might be listening, not to God, not exactly, not to the saints in the little chapel. She called out to anything older than the chapel, older than the village, older than the ice itself. She promised her body, her blood, her unborn child. She promised all her descendants, if she would ever have any, in exchange for two things, life and revenge. My mother says the wind stopped for a moment, the clouds moved over the moon, and the night became very dark. Something answered. She doesn't describe it. She says some things don't belong in the mouth, or on the page. She just says a bargain was made. The outsider and her bloodline stepped onto the far side of the cycle, as my mother calls it, the wrong side of the natural order. Down in the village, people clung to fire and light. Up on the mountain, she learned to love the cold and the dark. Down below, people wore out and died on schedule. Up there, she and her kin would age slowly, and weapons would break before their bones did. There was only one price. Once a year, in the darkest weeks of winter, when the days are shortest and the nights go on forever, they would come down from the mountain, and they would eat. From that winter on, my mother says, looking at the red candle between us. December stopped being just a month. She reaches out, steadies the candle with 2 fingers. It became a debt. My mother always ends the first half of the story with that line. From that winter on, December became a debt. When I was younger, I thought that was just a dramatic way to say bad things happened. I didn't understand that in our village, words like that are not just poetry, they're accounting. A debt means something is owed, and debts get collected. According to my mother, the first collection happened the very next year. At first, people pretended nothing had changed. The wagon was gone. The butcher was buried in frozen ground. The outsider had vanished into the peaks. Life closed back in on itself, like a wound trying to scar over. But then one December night, a boy didn't come home. He was 11, stubborn. He liked to linger at the edge of the forest, kicking at drifts, pretending the black between the trees was a doorway to somewhere better. His parents called and called. No answer. In the morning, they found his hat half buried in snow near the tree line. No blood, no tracks, no sign that he'd walked away on his own. The elders said he'd probably run off or fallen into a ravine. They searched for a day, two, then they stopped saying his name. The sin of one is the sin of all, remember? It's inconvenient to think about individual children when you're trying to convince yourself the web is still intact. The next December, it was an old man who stayed out too long at his traps. Then a woman who cut across the wrong field after dark. Then a drunk who wandered home singing and never finished the song. No bodies, no tracks that made sense, just absences, neat and clean, like someone had taken scissors to the fabric of the village. People started talking again. They didn't say the outsider's name. They didn't talk about the butcher. They just said things like, "She should have died up there," and "Nothing good comes back from the far side of the mountain." At some point, I don't know which year, because my mother's voice always gets vague around there, the red candles appeared. Each December, families began to set a tall red candle in the center of their tables and light it at dusk. Some said it was for the souls of the lost. Some said it was to remind themselves not to open the door after dark, no matter who was knocking. My mother has a different explanation. The candle is an apology, she says. It's us telling the mountain. We remember what we did. We know we deserve what comes down. The elders never announced this as an official rule. It just spread, house to house, window to window. A silent agreement in December. We don't pretend everything is normal. We lock our doors. We shut our curtains. We light the red candle. We don't count the empty chairs too loudly. And sometimes, my mother adds, we try very hard not to hear the screams. When I was a kid, I thought that part was just to scare me into coming home before dark. Every village has a version of that, right? Don't go into the woods. Don't talk to strangers. Don't stay out after sunset. Our version just came with extra details. Pale shapes walking between the pines. Bare feet that didn't sink into snow. Hands too strong for human bones. According to the story, the outsider kept her side of the bargain. She survived that climb. She carried her child to term in some ice cave where no one from the village would ever find her. She learned to hunt with teeth and hands instead of tools. She learned that human flesh can keep for a long time when the whole world is a freezer, and once a year, she came down, sometimes alone, sometimes with another shape moving just behind her, smaller, copying her steps. They didn't gorge themselves like wild animals. That's something my mother is very clear about. They took what they needed, one here, two there, a person who stayed late at work, a child who tested the rule about not opening the door when someone knocks after dark and says they're hurt. The mountain doesn't need to wipe out the village, my mother says. It just needs to make sure the village never forgets. It worked even now, with electricity and internet and tourist brochures that call this place charming and untouched. Nobody from here plans weddings or big celebrations in December. We don't schedule surgeries. We don't build houses. Nobody in their right mind starts anything new. December is not for beginnings. It's for balancing the book. By the time I was old enough to really listen, I started noticing something else about the way my mother told the story. Sometimes she'd slip. She'd say they when she meant the villagers, like she was outside them somehow. Then, later in the same sentence, she'd say we when she talked about the ones in the mountains. The first time I noticed, I thought it was just the way older people mix up pronouns. The second time, I thought I misheard her. The third time, she stopped mid-sentence, realized what she'd said, and smiled at me in a way that made my stomach go cold. There were other things, too. Winters never seemed to bother her. Other mothers wrapped themselves in layers, hands cracked and red, faces chapped by the wind. My mother could walk barefoot onto the porch to bring in wood and not even flinch. She didn't age the way everyone else did. When I look at photos from when I was small, she looks almost the same, maybe a few more lines at the corner of her eyes, but not enough to match the years. People in the village joked about it. "You must have good bones," they'd say. "You'll outlive us all." She'd smile politely and change the subject. She rarely ate with us. She cooked. She sat at the table. She poured tea. But more often than not, when it was time to put food on her own plate, she'd just shake her head and say, "I've already eaten." When I asked what, she would shrug. "Leftovers," she'd say. "You were at school." The older I got, the more I realized there were entire days where I had no memory of seeing her eat anything solid at all. Then there's me. I thought everyone could see almost perfectly in the dark if they just let their eyes adjust. I thought everyone's breath stayed steady when they stepped out into sub-zero air. I thought everyone could hear the difference between a branch snapping under snow and a bone cracking in the distance. Apparently not. The first time I spent a December in the city for school, I walked home alone at midnight and didn't understand why my friends were terrified. The cold felt light. The shadows felt normal. Maybe this is all coincidence. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. That's what I used to tell myself. But then we came up to the cabin this year. I should explain something before the end. This cabin isn't ours. It belongs to one of the families from the village, the kind who have money from selling land to tourists. They built it at the edge of the tree line. For peace and quiet, they said, a place to escape the stress of town. They wired it for electricity, then complained when the storms kept knocking out the power. They installed a big glass window facing the forest and said how beautiful the view was in winter. I knew they planned to spend December here this year. I heard them talking in the shop. They said something about how the red candle would protect them even better up here than in the village. My mother and I arrived 2 nights ago after dark. The door wasn't locked properly. People get careless when they believe more in candles than in bolts. Inside, there were the usual signs of life. Boots by the door, a half-finished mug of cocoa by the sink, a sweater thrown over the back of a chair, and on the table, waiting to be lit, a tall red candle. They never got the chance. I won't describe the rest. Not because it's too bloody, though there was blood, but because that's not the point. The point is that when the storm hit and the power went out, there were only 2 people left in the cabin. My mother lit the red candle anyway. "You see," she said, as the wax began to drip down the sides. "They still think this is for protection. They don't understand it was never meant for that." "What is it for?" I asked, even though by then I think I already knew. She looked at me over the flame. In its light, her eyes didn't look old at all. "It's a reminder," she said, "for them, of what they did. For us, of why we come back." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm and steady. "The bargain was simple," she said. "They wanted us gone. They threw us to the mountain. The mountain kept us. Now, once a year, we visit. We don't wipe them out. We just make sure they never forget." Outside, the wind howled through the pines. Somewhere far below, in the village, other red candles were burning behind closed curtains. "They tell this story to their children so they'll be careful in December," my mother went on. "We tell it to our children so they'll remember who they are." She squeezed my hand. "And who are we?" I asked. She smiled, the same smile she gave me when I was 5 and asked why other kids couldn't play in the snow as long as we could. "We're the ones on the far side of the cycle," she said. "We're the reason December is the scariest month of the year." The candle between us has burned low while I've been typing. The wax has pooled on the table in a dark red ring. The sky outside the small window is starting to turn from black to gray. It will be morning soon. My mother is already putting on her boots, ready to go back up the mountain before anyone dares to come looking this way. They won't. Of course, not right away. In December, people are very good at pretending not to notice who's missing. She tells me to blow out the candle. Before I do, I want to leave this here. A translated story from a small village most of you will never visit. Maybe you'll think it's just another piece of horror fiction buried on this site. Maybe that's safer. But if you ever find yourself in a place where every window is dark in December and a tall red candle burns in the center of every table, don't comfort yourself by saying the people inside are safe. Sometimes, the ones telling stories by candlelight aren't hiding from what's in the dark. Sometimes, we are what comes down from the mountain to feed. My mother is calling me. It's time to go. The candle is almost finished. I'll blow it out now. I've pulled Ralphie out of some weird situations. I've picked him up from apartments where the hallways smelled like weed and broken dreams. I've driven him home from strip clubs at 3 in the morning. I've bailed him out when he accidentally slept with someone's cousin, sister, or both. But until this New Year's, I had never picked him up from the side of the road in the desert, barefoot and without pants, looking like something that crawled out of a grave. That was the morning I realized 2 things. My best friend is not bulletproof. Some hookup horror stories don't fit into the usual categories. I'm Steve. By the way, I'm the boring one in the friendship. I drink, but I don't black out. I flirt, but I don't close the deal with a different girl every weekend. I go home before the sun comes up. Ralphie is the opposite of all of that. If there's a scale for being a womanizer, Ralphie bent the needle years ago. He's the guy your girlfriend's friends warn her about. He's the reason some dudes don't like their girlfriends going out in groups. I've watched him walk into a bar, point out a woman he likes, and call it like a shot, then take her home 3 hours later. He's not a bad person. Exactly. He just treats dating like a competitive sport and other people's bodies like trophies. So every January 1st for the last 5 years, my unofficial job has been this. Listen to Ralphie brag over greasy breakfast about whatever New Year's Eve conquest he landed. He calls it New Year's recap. I call it trying not to lose my eggs and sausage. This year, I didn't get a brunch invite. I got a phone call at 8:12 a.m. from a number I didn't recognize. I was half awake, half hungover, face stuck to the couch cushion, when my phone buzzed against my cheek. I swiped without looking and croaked, "Hello?" For a second, there was just wind and static. Then a voice I knew way too well said, "Steve?" "Yeah?" I squinted at the caller ID. Unknown number. "Who's this?" "It's me. It's Ralphie." He didn't sound like Ralphie. Ralphie's usual tone is 60% smug, 30% horny, 10%, "I dare you to judge me." The voice on the phone was flat and thin, like it had been left out in the sun too long. "Whose phone are you calling from?" I asked. "Don't worry about it," he said. "Can you come get me?" I sat up, my head pounding. "What, like, from your place?" "No, from Surprise." I blinked. "Surprise, like the town?" "Yeah." "Dude, that's like 40 minutes away. Why the hell are you in Surprise?" Silence. I thought the call had dropped. Then he said very quietly, "Just, please, come get me. I'll tell you later. I'm near 163rd and Grand. Just drive up Grand. You'll see me." "You don't have your car?" "No." "Where are you staying?" "Outside." He let out a shaky breath. "Just come, man. Don't make me explain it over the phone. That's when I knew something was actually wrong. Ralphie loves telling stories. If there's a chance to make something sound crazier than it was, he'll grab it with both hands. Now he sounded like a guy calling 911 from a trunk. "Okay," I said. "I'm coming. Stay where you are." "Trust me," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." If you've never been out toward Surprise, Arizona, let me paint you a picture. The Phoenix metro area kind of fades out in that direction. Houses get farther apart. Strip malls give way to empty lots. The highway thins out, then spits you onto long, straight stretches of road where the landscape is mostly variations of beige and thorny. I threw on jeans, grabbed my keys, and drove with the sun stabbing me in the eyes the whole way. My head throbbed with every bump. I kept glancing at my phone, watching the little map icon crawl up grand. The farther I went, the more my GPS started to freak out. Signal cutting in and out, the little arrow jumping forward 15 feet, then back. I passed the last gas station and fast food sign and kept going until the buildings thinned down to scattered houses and business lots that looked closed even when they weren't. 163rd and Grand, I muttered. "Where the hell are you, man?" Then I saw him. He was standing on the shoulder of the road like someone had placed him there. There was no car nearby, no house within easy walking distance, just dirt and scrub and a faint outline of mountains in the distance. Ralphie had never looked small to me before. He's not huge, but he's a gym guy, always tanned, always in fitted shirts. The guy I saw that morning looked deflated. His hair, usually styled like he's about to film a music video, was sticking up in every direction. His shirt, one of those slim-fit New Year's button-downs he wears to look classy, was half unbuttoned and wrinkled like someone had grabbed it and twisted. He was barefoot, and from the waist down, he was just legs and boxers, no pants, no shoes. Standing in the dirt at the edge of the highway like that was a normal thing to do. I slowed, pulled onto the shoulder, and stared at him through the windshield for a second before rolling down the window. "Dude," I said, "did you lose a fight with a washing machine?" He didn't laugh. Ralphie always laughs. Even when a joke bombs, he'll at least roll his eyes. This time, he just walked around the car, opened the passenger door, and slid in without a word. Up close, he looked worse. His eyes were bloodshot, not just from drinking, but from something else. His skin was pale under the tan, and there was a weird, distant look on his face. I've seen him hungover, sick, high. I've never seen him hollow. I put the car in drive. Okay. I'm not gonna pretend this isn't the weirdest version of the morning after ride I've ever given you, but I'll wait until we're moving to start judging. "Don't," he said. "Don't what?" "Don't joke. Just drive." That actually shut me up. I pulled back onto the road and pointed us toward the freeway. The first 10 minutes were silent except for the tires on asphalt and my engine complaining. I kept waiting for him to start talking. Normally, by now, he'd be telling me about how he rang in the new year, complete with gestures and sound effects I did not ask for. Instead, he stared out the window like the desert might stare back. "You want to tell me where your pants are?" I tried. "Or is that a 2025 fashion thing I'm not up on yet?" "Nothing." "Whose phone did you call me from?" "Guy at a gas station," he mumbled. "Let me use it." I glanced at him. "You walked to a gas station. From where?" He shook his head. "Don't, please." The please got me. This is a guy who once threw my phone in a pool because I wouldn't go to Vegas with him. Hearing him say please like that was like hearing a lion whisper, "Sorry." "Okay," I said. "No questions. For now, we drove back in town. I dropped him at his place because he insisted on it. I offered him sweatpants from my trunk. He refused. He went inside his house without looking back, moving like every part of him hurt. I sat in my car for a minute after he closed the door, trying to decide how worried to be. Hungover? Definitely. Embarrassed? Probably. But there was something else in the way he'd hunched his shoulders, the way he flinched when we passed a billboard with a woman on it. Like just the image was too much. I figured he'd text me later with some half-funny, half-messed-up version of events. "Dude, you're not gonna believe this," followed by details I really didn't need. He didn't. 2 days went by. I saw his Instagram go dark. No party pics, no mystery girls tagged. He didn't show up in the group chat. He didn't even like or react to anything. On day 3, I got worried enough to start asking around. I called the guy who threw the New Year's party. "You remember what time Ralphie left?" I asked. Sometime after midnight," he said, "with that girl." "What girl?" "The one in the black dress. Kinda quiet. You didn't see them leave? You were still there, right?" "I must have been in the kitchen," I said. "You know her? She a friend of someone?" "Thought she was with him," he said. "You know how he is. They were talking most of the night. They left together. Looked chill. No arguments? No drama?" "Nah, man. Just standard Ralphie behavior." "Why? Is he in trouble?" "I don't know," I said. "That's the problem." Everyone I asked said the same thing. Nothing weird. Ralphie did exactly what Ralphie always does. Found a girl, turned on the charm, left with her like it was nothing. Whatever went wrong, it went wrong after he walked out that door. On the 5th day, he finally called. "Come over," he said. Brunch and bragging. I tried. "Just come over," he repeated. So I did. We sat on my apartment balcony because he said he needed air. It was late afternoon, the sky low and gray, the kind of Arizona winter day that makes you forget summer ever existed. He lit a cigarette, which he only does when he's actually stressed and not just trying to look cool. His hands were steady, but his eyes weren't. "You ever had something happen," he said slowly, "that you know no one's gonna believe, even before you open your mouth?" "Every time I tell people we're friends," I said automatically, then backed off when he didn't smile. "Yeah, a few times. Why?" He took a drag, exhaled, watched the smoke disappear. "I'll tell you what happened," he said, "but you gotta promise you won't say I'm crazy." "I already know you're crazy." "Steve." I shut up. He stared out over the parking lot for a long moment, like he was watching something far away. "You remember that girl I left the party with?" he asked. "Black dress? Quiet? Everyone thought she was with someone else." "Yeah." He nodded. "Okay," he said. "This is what happened after we left. That's where I'm going to lose some of you. Because until that night, I'd have bet money that Ralphie's wildest New Year's story would be about somebody's angry husband or a police officer at the door. Instead, what he told me made all of that sound normal, and I almost wish he'd never told me at all. He started with the drive. "We left right after midnight," he said. "Countdown, cheap champagne, the whole thing. She didn't say much the whole night, but she laughed at my dumb jokes, so I figured she was into it." "That's your baseline for romance. Got it," I said. He ignored me. "She said she lived out in Surprise. I offered to drive. You were still inside trying to argue with the DJ about the Weeknd playlist because he skipped all the good tracks," I said. "Don't drag my taste into this." Ralphie gave me a look and went on. They walked out to his car, air still smelling like fireworks and spilled beer. The girl didn't stumble. even though she'd had enough drinks to make anyone else's steps loose. She just moved, smoothly. She didn't ask my last name, he said. Didn't ask where I worked. Nothing. Just got in the car and told me to take Grand out towards Surprise. He remembered the way the city lights thinned as they drove, party noise fading into the background hum of tires and engine. At first, there were other cars, then fewer, then almost none. Your GPS ever just give up? He asked. Yeah, when I go see you, apparently, I said. He shook his head. No, like, actually die. I had full bars leaving the party. Once we got past the last gas station, my phone started acting up. Map kept freezing, then jumping, then the little signal icon just dropped. No service. Pandora stopped mid-song. He'd been trying to set a mood, of course. That meant music. He joked about how his date was getting the full premium package, free ride, drunk Ralphie, curated playlist of the Weeknd. She didn't laugh at that either. She just said, I like his older stuff, and went back to looking out the window. He tried Pandora first, buffering, spinning circle, no connection. So I pulled up my downloads, he said. I had that one track saved. I knew which one. He'd sent me the link the week before with, tell me this doesn't make you want to do bad things. Yeah, I said. I remember. Hit play, he said. It worked. I took that as a sign the night was gonna go my way. It was stupid, but it sounded exactly like him. Her house, if you can call it that, was out past the point where I'd picked him up days later. A single-story place. Maybe a manufactured home, maybe something older. One light on inside. No cars in the dirt driveway except his. No neighboring houses close enough to see through the thin desert trees. If a horror movie started like that, I'd turn it off for being too obvious, I said. Yeah, he said. I know. I didn't think horror. I just thought, hell yeah, no neighbors. He parked. The music was still playing quietly through his phone speakers, thick bass, soft vocals. She led the way up to the door. Key turned, hinge squeaked. The inside was normal, he said. Like boring normal. Couch, coffee table, cheap TV, no candles or weird witchcraft stuff. No guy waiting with a shotgun. It smelled like lemon cleaner and, I don't know, dust? She didn't turn on many lights, just a lamp in the corner. Enough to see, not enough to make it bright. They sat. She took off her shoes. He took off his. They kissed a little. Familiar territory. Then I started feeling heavier, he said. Not drunk. I know drunk. This was like someone put weights on my arms and legs and turned the air thick. You think she slipped something in your drink? I asked. He hesitated. I thought that at first. I have no idea when she would have done it, though, and if this was just drugs, man, I don't know what the hell it was. He tried to keep the music going. Pandora was still dead, but his phone had the song cached, so it looped, same track again and again. He joked about it. She said she didn't mind. At some point, she got up, he said she was gonna get ready, went down the hall, bathroom, I guess. I was still on the couch. I remember thinking I should stand up, follow her, something. Couldn't get my body to cooperate. The bass line of that song thumped in his memory while he tried to stay awake. And then, he said, it was like somebody hit pause on me. Black. He didn't know how long he was out. Could have been 5 minutes. Could have been an hour. When he opened his eyes again, things were off. I was on a bed, he said. Not the couch. I didn't remember walking there. I didn't remember standing up. I just was there. On my back. Sheets under me. Room dark. No overhead light. No lamp. Just a faint glow from his phone somewhere in the room, still playing that damn track. Same song, low volume, like background noise in a bad dream. I tried to sit up, he said. Nothing. Arms wouldn't move, legs wouldn't move. I could feel them, but it was like someone had poured concrete over me. He could blink, he could breathe, he could move his eyes. What freaked me out, he said, was that I could see better than usual in the dark. I could make out shapes, edges, the ceiling, the closet, the doorway. Somewhere off to the side, there was movement. Soft sounds, breathing that wasn't his, the creak of a mattress. At first I thought she was there with me, he said, like on the bed. That's what it sounded like. He turned his head. It took everything he had, like his neck weighed 50 pounds, but he got his eyes to the side. And I see her, he said. She's straddling somebody. He held up a hand when I opened my mouth. Not in detail. I'm not trying to, but yeah. She's on top of someone, knees on either side of his hips, moving. You get it. I nodded, suddenly very aware of how dry my mouth was. I was pissed for like half a second, he said. Like, did I pass out and she just pulled in some other dude? I was about to try to say something, except I couldn't. Then the guy under her spoke. Same voice he'd heard his whole life, same dumb tone he'd heard on voicemail, in mirrors, in drunk videos. This is how you like it, right? The guy said. Ralphie froze. He sounded like me, Ralphie said quietly. Not kinda like me. Not, oh, that dude reminds me of me. It was my voice. Same words I've used 100 times. Same stupid confidence. The girl laughed, ran her hands up the guy's chest, kept moving. He said stuff, Ralphie said. Things I'm not proud of. The kind of lines I've thrown out before, but twisted, worse. Like he took my worst moments and turned the dial up. The guy tipped his head back. In the dim light, Ralphie saw his profile. Hair, jaw, stubble. It was like looking at my reflection in a dirty window, he said, off just enough to make it worse. He forced his eyes to focus. The music throbbed in the background. The girl's hair swung. Her face turned toward the guy underneath her, blocking part of him for a second. Then she shifted, and Ralphie got a full look at the man's face. It was me, he said. Down to the scar on my chin from when I fell off my bike at 12. Same eyebrows, same stupid mole on my cheek, except the eyes. What about them? I asked. They were too awake, he said. Too bright, like there was somebody behind them who'd been watching me from the outside my whole life and finally got to be in the driver's seat. He made this little motion with his hand, like he was trying to shake the image off his fingers. And you were where? I asked. On the bed, on the floor. In the same room, he said. Corner of the bed, propped up against the headboard. I realized that after a second, I wasn't just floating. I was there, in my own body, stuck. He tried to talk. No sound. He tried to move his hands, to reach out, grab the girl, grab himself. Something. Nothing responded. But he moved fine, Ralphie said. Like the controls got switched. He put his hands on her hips, sat up a little, whispered in her ear. She ate it up. Ralphie swallowed, staring past me. I realized I was watching my own body be better at being me than I ever was, he said, and it scared me more than anything else. The other Ralphie, whatever it was, tilted his head. For a second, his gaze slid off the girl's shoulder and drifted across the room. And then he looked right at me, Ralphie said. Not toward him, at him. Eyes locking in the dark, across the room. I don't know how to explain this part, Ralphie said. But when he looked at me, it felt like a mirror clicking into place, like he'd been aware of me the whole time and finally decided to acknowledge it. The other one smiled, slow, mean. He leaned up, Ralphie said something in her ear I couldn't quite hear. She turned her head, looked almost right through me, like I was fogged glass, and she smiled too. He took a shuddering breath. "That's when I lost it," he said. Inside, I was screaming. I was trying to rip myself out of whatever I was stuck in, and something snapped. Black again. When I woke up, he said, I was outside. The way he described it. He was on his back in the dirt, sky starting to lighten, cold air on his legs, rocks digging into his spine. No house in sight. Just low brush and the hint of a structure way off in the distance that might have been anything. My phone was dead, he said. No wallet, no keys, just my shirt and boxers. No footprints in the dirt except mine. He walked, barefoot, for miles, until the sparse houses turned into something closer to civilization. Found a gas station, borrowed a stranger's phone, called the one person who'd actually show up. "That's when you picked me up," he finished. He looked at me like he was bracing for laughter, for a gotcha, for me to tell him he dreamed it all. I didn't. "Maybe she drugged you," I said finally. "Maybe you had some insane out-of-body nightmare thing." "Maybe," he said. "Maybe the guy was some random dude, and your brain just pasted your face on him afterward." "Maybe," he repeated. We sat there a while, listening to distant traffic and someone's TV through the open window of the apartment below mine. "I don't chase girls anymore," he said eventually. "I delete numbers. I leave parties alone. If a girl I don't know looks at me too long, I go home." "That's not the worst self-improvement arc," I said. He almost smiled. "You know what really screws with me?" he asked. "Sometimes I'll hear a Weeknd track at the gym or in an Uber, and for a second I feel like I'm not lined up right, like I'm half a step to the left of myself." "That's anxiety," I said. "Or guilt." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe she didn't just make one of me that night. Maybe she let something else try me on, and it liked the fit." He stubbed out his cigarette, ground it into the ashtray. "Either way," he said, "I'm done giving strangers rides home from New Year's parties." I tried to lighten it, because that's what I do when things get too heavy. "Maybe you're just that good, man," I said. "You literally got front row seats to yourself performing. That's some next-level ego." He didn't laugh. "I don't think it was about me," he said. "I think I was practice or material. I think she's still out there, finding guys who think they're untouchable and showing them otherwise." He stood up, stretched like the conversation had made him older. If this was a normal story, this is where I'd tell you that he went to therapy, found God, settled down, whatever. He hasn't. He's just quieter now. Drinks less, leaves early. Every New Year's, people still invite him to parties. Every New Year's, he says no. And every time the Weeknd comes on at some random bar and the lights dim a little more than they should, I've seen him go pale and stare at nothing for a full minute. Like he's listening for a voice I can't hear. I'm not saying I believe him completely. I'm not saying I don't think there's a rational explanation buried somewhere under the booze and fear. But I will say this. If you ever find yourself driving out near 163rd and Grand after a New Year's party, and some ridiculously hot girl you barely know asks you to follow her home, maybe don't. Because in the best case, you wake up with a hangover and a funny story. And in the worst case, you wake up in the dark and realize the person doing the talking in your voice, in your body, on your bed, isn't actually you, and you'll have to walk a long way barefoot before anyone even picks up the phone. I'm not posting this because I want attention. I'm posting it because I'm scared I won't make it past midnight this year. If this account goes quiet after tonight, just assume I failed. You can call me whatever you want. My real name doesn't matter. What matters is that last New Year's Eve, I found out why so many people kill themselves around this time. The scary part? I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think it's just depression. I think something is helping. Last year, December 31st, I was alone in my crappy one-bedroom apartment somewhere in the Midwest. It's the kind of building that always smells like old cooking oil and cigarette smoke, with buzzing hallway lights and radiators that sound like they're dying. Everyone else, according to Instagram, was out with friends, with partners, at parties, kissing as the ball dropped. I had a bottle of cheap vodka, a bag of stale chips, and a New Year's countdown show playing on mute on my TV. Bright colors, celebrities pretending they're enjoying themselves, canned laughter. It made my place feel even smaller. I'd already had a couple of drinks by 10 p.m. By 11, I was drunk enough that my thoughts stopped being full sentences and turned into little sharp phrases that hurt when they repeated, "You're alone again." She moved on so fast. No one cares where you are tonight. She is my ex. We were together 3 years. She cheated on me, lied about it, and somehow I still ended up feeling like I was the one who wasn't enough. You'd think after a year I'd be over it, but New Year's hits different. It's like the calendar turns into a measuring stick for how far behind you really are. By 11:50 p.m., I was on the couch, half sitting, half slumped, watching people on TV scream and wave signs in Times Square, while my phone screen stayed dark and empty. By 11:57 p.m., everything changed. I remember looking over at the far corner of my living room, between the bookshelf and the hallway. It's just a boring corner. Beige walls, a little patch where the paint peeled, a stack of boxes I never unpacked, except it didn't look right. At first I thought it was just the alcohol. The shadows looked thicker there, like someone had turned the brightness down in that one spot. I squinted, blinked, rubbed my eyes. The rest of the room was lit by the TV and a cheap floor lamp, but that corner stayed strangely dark. Then the darkness stood up. There's no elegant way to say it. 1 second it was just a deep patch of shadow. The next, it had a shape. Tall. Too tall, narrow shoulders, long arms that didn't quite match any normal proportions. Like someone had sketched a person and then stretched them out on the page. I tried to sit up, but my body didn't respond the way it should have. My limbs felt heavy, like they were filled with wet sand. My head buzzed, not just from the vodka, but from this weird pressure inside my skull. I opened my mouth to say something, but no sound came out. For a second, I thought maybe I was having a stroke. Then it spoke. Rough year. The voice didn't come from the corner. Exactly. It was low and rough, but it didn't feel like it was traveling through the air. It was inside my head, behind my ears, echoing around like my skull was a hollow room. I tried to say, "Who's there?" but my jaw wouldn't move. "You don't have to pretend with me," it said. "Not anymore." On the TV, a host laughed way too loudly at some joke I didn't hear. Confetti cannons went off in slow motion, little colorful pieces drifting down over strangers hugging in the cold. "You know it's pointless," the voice continued, slow and calm. "You know you're not getting a happy ending, not the way people like you live." The thing in the corner didn't move closer. It just stood there, this tall, black figure pressed into the angle where the two walls met, darker than any shadow I've ever seen. My heart was pounding so fast it hurt, but my hands lay limp at my sides. "You think she's thinking about you tonight?" the voice asked, and I knew exactly who it meant. You think she's sitting around crying because you're alone? Images slammed into my mind, fast and vivid. Her at some bar, her laughing, her leaning in close to some guy's ear, her phone lighting up with my name and her flipping it over, screen down, smiling. She replaced you before you even realized she was leaving, the voice went on. She lied to your face and then made you feel like the problem. That's what you are, a problem, an inconvenience, dead weight. I could feel something heavy pressing onto my chest, like an invisible hand. It wasn't just words anymore. It was like it was reaching into my brain and turning dials. Every memory of her that hurt got louder. Every tiny good thing I'd done. Every time I thought I mattered to someone, that all went dim. You've thought about ending it before, it said, almost gently. You've pictured it, wondered what it would feel like to finally stop trying. I don't know how it knew that, but it did. It picked through my head like it had a maps. I remembered nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling that crushing weight in my chest and thinking, if I just disappeared, it would be quiet. No more bills, no more awkward small talk at work, no more scrolling past engagement photos and baby announcements. You don't have to be brave, it whispered. You don't have to keep playing a game that's rigged. The only honest choice is to stop. My body started moving. That's the worst part to explain. It felt like I was half in a dream. My perspective didn't line up with what my body was doing. My head was screaming stop, but my legs swung clumsily off the couch, and my feet carried me toward the kitchen. On the TV, they started the countdown. 10. I stumbled past the table. My vision tunneled. Everything was fuzzy around the edges, but the corner of the room with that tall, black thing stayed sharp. 9. It hadn't moved at all. I got the sickening feeling that it didn't need to move. 8. My hand reached for the kitchen drawer where I keep utensils and other things. My fingers were shaking, but they obeyed some command that didn't feel like mine. 7. 6. I remember metal glinting, the cold weight of it in my hand, the way my own reflection flickered in the shiny surface for a split second. Eyes red, face slack, like I was already gone. 5. You're doing everyone a favor, the voice hummed. No one has to watch you fall apart anymore. No one has to be burdened by your misery. The story ends before it gets more pathetic. 4. 3. I wish I could tell you I dropped it, that I fought it, that I had some sudden burst of willpower and shouted no and proved I was stronger than whatever this thing was. I didn't. 2. 1. Happy New Year! The crowd on TV screamed. Fireworks went off, somewhere miles away. People kissed and hugged and promised each other that this year would be different. In my kitchen, something warm and wet hit the floor. The last thing I remember seeing clearly was the tall, black figure in the corner of the living room, exactly where it had been the whole time, watching, waiting, somehow satisfied. Then everything went dark. I woke up to bright white light and the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. My throat was dry. My arms felt heavy. When I tried to move my hands, I felt bandages tug against my skin. A nurse noticed my eyes open and rushed over, calling for a doctor. They said my name like they were relieved and exhausted at the same time. Apparently, my friend Colin saved my life. Colin's a night shift nurse at a hospital about 15 minutes from my place. Earlier that evening, he'd texted me, asking if I wanted to come over after his shift so I wouldn't be alone on New Year's. I told him I was fine. He told me later he'd had a bad feeling. When I stopped answering his messages around midnight, he drove to my apartment on his way home. He still had a spare key from when we used to watch football every Sunday. He found me on the kitchen floor. There was a lot of blood. The TV was still playing some replay of the countdown. My front door was unlocked. He called 911, did what he could until the paramedics came. The doctor told me that if Colin had gotten there 20 minutes later, I wouldn't be here to type this. After the medical stuff, they transferred me to the psych unit. I spent 2 months there. Evaluations, meds, therapy. Words like major depressive disorder, schizoaffective disorders, and suicidal behavior got thrown around a lot. The first time I tried to explain about the tall, black figure in the corner of my living room and the voice in my head, the psychiatrist nodded the way people nod when they hear something they've heard 100 times before. Hallucination, stress, alcohol, trauma. I stopped talking about it pretty quickly. It was easier to just say, yeah, I was overwhelmed. I drank too much. I snapped. They adjusted my meds. They taught me coping skills. Slowly, the fog in my head cleared a little. By the time they discharged me, I could almost believe it had all been in my mind, that there was no tall figure, no voice, no thing in the corner of the room. I would have kept believing that, too, until Halloween. Halloween has always been easy for me to ignore. Even as a kid, I never liked it much. Costumes, masks, people pretending to be monsters for fun. None of it ever did anything for me. The fake stuff just made the real darkness feel cheaper somehow. This year, I tried to treat it like any other night. I got off work, microwaved some leftovers, and scrolled Reddit while the occasional knock at my door reminded me I'd forgotten to buy candy again. I ended up on r/true off my chest first, then drifted into r/no sleep, because why not make my anxiety worse before bed, right? Most of it was the usual, creepy stories, cursed objects, weird neighbors, and then I saw a title that froze my blood. I only tried to kill myself on New Year's Eve because something told me to. I clicked it so fast I almost dropped my phone. The post was from an account that hadn't been active in months. The user talked about drinking alone on December 31st, about feeling crushingly lonely while the world celebrated outside. So far, so familiar. Then they wrote, "It started when I saw him in the corner of my living room, a tall, black shadow. At first I thought it was just darkness, but it stood up and started talking to me from inside my head. My vision tunneled. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I couldn't scroll. I read that paragraph over and over, my heart hammering in my throat. They described the same heaviness in their limbs, the same feeling of being half asleep, half paralyzed, the same voice, low and calm, telling them they were worthless, that no one cared, that it was time to stop playing the game. They glossed over the details, but it was clear they'd attempted suicide. The only reason they lived was because a neighbor heard a crash and broke down their door. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put the phone on the table. It could have been coincidence. People with depression have similar experiences. People drink and spiral. People see shadow people in sleep paralysis all the time. That's what I told myself. Then I scrolled down. One of the top comments said, "Dude, I thought I was crazy for this, but I had almost the exact same thing happen on New Year's Eve 2019. Shadow in the corner, voice in my head, telling me to jump from my balcony at midnight. I haven't told anyone because it sounds insane." Another reply, "Same here, New Year's 2021. I was on a cruise. Everyone went up to watch fireworks. I stayed in my cabin and almost walked off my balcony into the ocean because something told me it was time to go. There was something in the room with me. Tall, black, watching. More comments piled up. Different years, different countries. different methods, but the pattern was the same. Always around New Year's, always at night, always alone, always a tall black figure in the corner, always the same twisted, persuasive voice. My heart wouldn't stop pounding. I checked the post date. It was from 3 years ago, and there were more. Once I knew what to look for, I started seeing it everywhere, scattered across subreddits like r/suicide watch, r/depression, even old buried threads on r/ask Reddit, when people talked about the darkest night of their lives. Little throwaway lines like, "I swear I saw something in the corner telling me to do it." It didn't feel like my thoughts. The Shadow Man comes every New Year's Eve. I spent hours that night reading, my dinner untouched, the knocks at my door fading into the background. Some stories were obviously trolls, some were vague. But a few felt too close. I wasn't the only one who tried to blame it on just mental illness. A lot of people said their doctors called it psychosis, dissociation, or a bad combo of alcohol and meds. But every now and then, a survivor would say, "It felt like something else was steering." That sentence sat in my chest like a rock. Over the next few weeks, I went deeper than I probably should have. I started with basic stuff. Google searches. Shadow figure New Year suicide. Tall black presence in the corner of the room. Voice telling me to kill myself New Year's Eve. A lot of it was fluff, paranormal forums, creepypasta, sleep paralysis demons, but buried in the noise were patterns that didn't care about location, culture, or language. Japan, Germany, Brazil, Canada. Different names, different interpretations, same shape. One late night, I ended up on an old archived forum dedicated to obscure Roman history and pagan rituals. Someone there mentioned a winter demon that fed on despair at the turning of the year. It had a name. Tenebris. I knew enough Latin from random online trivia to recognize the root. Tenebrae, darkness, shadows. Tenebris, in the shadows. By the darkness. The thread was half academic, half unhinged rant. But there were references, real ones, to texts I could look up. Old Roman chroniclers who wrote about strange mass suicides around the winter solstice and the calends of January. One case in particular kept coming up. An entire legion, roughly 5,000 men, stationed near a cliff in Gaul, who supposedly threw themselves over the edge in a single night. The official histories blamed mutiny, disease, religious mania. But some fragments attributed it to a nocturnal presence that pressed upon the minds of the soldiers as they awaited the dawn of the new year. Those fragments used phrases that, translated roughly, sounded like the shadow in the corner, the whisperer in the bones, the eater of second chances. Modern historians, sensible ones, dismissed it as metaphor. Soldiers weary of war, a form of mass hysteria. Who wants to believe in a suicide spirit that shows up on the darkest nights of the year? But then there was a different kind of source. A ritual text linked in the forum from a private scan, some obscure book of Roman household rites. It mentioned offerings left at doorways in late December to appease the tenebris that comes in deep night to harvest despair. Harvest. That word made my stomach twist. The more I looked, the more a terrifying picture formed. Not a demon that randomly haunted people, but a thing that fed once a year, when people were most vulnerable, when everyone else was distracted by fireworks and resolutions, like some kind of spiritual bear, gorging itself on failed lives so it could hibernate through the year. I would have shrugged this off as dark folklore if it weren't for the posts I'd already read, the ones that sounded like my own story written by strangers. Eventually, Reading wasn't enough. I went back to that first New Year's post that had hooked me on Halloween. I messaged the original poster, not really expecting an answer. I just wrote, I had almost the exact same experience last New Year's. I saw it too, the thing in the corner. Did it ever come back? I stared at the message for 5 minutes before hitting send. They responded 2 days later. Not yet, but I feel it when December comes. There was a Discord link at the end of the message. We talk about it here. Join if you want. I don't know what I expected when I clicked it. Maybe a handful of people looking for spooky validation, maybe a troll server. What I found was worse. The server was small, a couple hundred people at most. The channel names were practical: hash introductions, hash coping strategies, hash research, hash check-ins. Not what you'd expect from a ghost hunting group. In number sign introductions, people shared short summaries of why they were there. Tried to jump in front of a train New Year's 20. Tall shadow in the tunnel. Voice in my head. Psychiatrist says psychosis. I'm not so sure. Almost overdosed alone in my dorm New Year's Eve. Saw something in the corner by my desk. Haven't slept in the dark since. Cruise ship balcony. New Year's fireworks. Something told me to step into the dark. I actually climbed up. Security found me before I leaned forward. There were dozens of stories. Not everyone had a diagnosis. Not everyone had been drinking. Some had been stone sober. Some religious. Some not at all. Different backgrounds. Same pattern. We started calling ourselves survivors of Tenebris. Half joking, half dead. Serious. People shared grounding techniques. Medication info. Ways to stay busy through late December nights. There was a whole channel dedicated to tracking weird synchronicities and lore. One user, Legio13, posted long translated excerpts from Roman texts and medieval chronicles about midwinter suicides. Another, Cold Balcony, kept a spreadsheet of modern suicide statistics around New Year's in different countries, stripped of names, locations, personalities. The trend lines looked wrong. There were spikes that didn't match other holidays, even adjusting for loneliness and seasonal depression. There was still something off about the numbers. I know I'm not a scientist. I know correlation isn't causation. But once you see a pattern like that, it's hard to unsee it. There were also absences. Old usernames that hadn't been active since early January. Accounts that had been chatty, anxious, counting down the days. And then nothing. No goodbyes. No, I'm okay. Just silence. We didn't talk about them much, but everyone knew what we were afraid of. They didn't just move on from the server. Tenebris got them. Which brings me to tonight. It's December 31st again. I'm back in my apartment. Same crappy beige walls. Same ugly corner between the bookshelf and the hallway. Different me, I guess. I've been taking my meds, seeing a therapist, trying to eat like a human being instead of a raccoon. I quit drinking for a while. I lasted until about 3 hours ago. There's an open bottle on the table. I'm not drunk yet, but I can feel that familiar warmth creeping into my face, loosening the edges of my thoughts. The Discord server has a New Year's Watch channel open right now. People checking in from different time zones, promising to stay online until they're safely past midnight. My cursor keeps hovering over it. Instead, I opened this tab because something feels wrong. The air in here is heavy in a way that has nothing to do with the radiator. The shadows in the corners are longer than they should be. The TV keeps glitching. Tiny static flickers that make the smiling hosts stutter and warp for half a second before snapping back. It's 11:23 p.m. As I type this, I keep glancing at that corner. The corner. It looks normal, It looks boring. Just boxes and peeling paint, but every few minutes, I get this crawling sensation at the back of my neck, like someone is standing right behind me, watching the words appear on the screen over my shoulder. I haven't turned around to check. My phone buzzes every so often. Colin texted earlier. "You good for tonight? Want me to swing by after my shift again?" I stared at the message too long, then lied. "I'm okay this year. Promise." I haven't answered the 3 follow-up texts where he asked if I was sure, because here's the thing. Last year, Tenebris showed up at 11:57. Tonight, I felt something around 11:10. Like a pressure change, like the air in the room thickened just a little, enough to make me swallow and suddenly become hyper-aware of my own heartbeat. I can hear a voice at the edge of my thoughts now. It's not clear yet, not like last time, more like a low hum, a vibration under the floorboards of my mind. I know how this sounds. It sounds like a guy with a history of mental illness and a suicide attempt, sitting alone on New Year's Eve, scaring himself with ghost stories online. It sounds like the exact scenario every psychiatrist warns you about. But if you made it this far, if you've ever felt that awful, seductive whisper telling you the world would be better off without you at exactly this time of year, you know there might be more to it. It's 11:47 p.m. now. The corner of the living room is darker than it was when I started writing this. I raised the brightness on my TV and my laptop, but that one patch of wall just absorbs it all, like light goes in and doesn't come back out. The hum in my head is starting to form words. I'm typing faster because my fingers are getting numb, and I recognize this. The heaviness, the slow, dreamlike feeling, the way my own thoughts are starting to sound. Edited. There it is. "Rough year," it murmurs, like an old friend. I'm not going to turn around. I refuse to give it the satisfaction. If it wants me, it can stare at the back of my head. It's telling me the same things as before, but smarter this time. It's not just using my ex. It's using everything. My hospital stay, my diagnosis, the fact that most people who read this will assume I'm crazy. "Who will believe you?" it asks. "You're just another sad story on a horror subreddit." Maybe it's right. Maybe you'll scroll past this and forget it by morning. Maybe this will just be one more creepy story in a sea of creepier ones. But if you're reading this on some future New Year's Eve, alone, with a drink in your hand, and the corner of your room suddenly feels too dark, please, just remember this. The voice is not you. The shadow is not harmless. The urge is not always yours. It's 11:57 p.m. now, the same time as last year. I can feel it standing in the corner again, tall and patient, like it never left, like it's been waiting 12 months just to see if I learned anything. My hands are shaking so badly I'm making typos and having to go back and fix them. The hum is getting louder. The words are clearer. "It's time," it says. I don't know if posting this does anything. I don't know if naming it helps or just feeds it. Tenebris is patient. It waits all year. If this account goes silent after tonight, if I don't log into the Discord, if Colin ends up being the one to write an update instead of me, just remember, not everyone who dies on New Year's Eve wanted to. Some of us just listen to the thing in the corner. It's waiting. I just hope this year I don't